Hey everyone, Mike here, and welcome back to another episode of the Language of Leadership podcast. I'm here with ErickaDJames, a founder, CEO, entrepreneur, author of multiple books, and creator and leader of multiple organizations and national networks in the United States. Ericka, it's so great to be with you today.
Oh, I'm so delighted to be here, Mike. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, Ericka, let's jump right in and give you an opportunity to briefly introduce yourself to our audience. Your background, as I mentioned, covers so many different areas. I think we might even have to focus on just a few of them, but please share with us a little bit about your work and how you got to where you are today.
Yes, well, I figure everything I do across all of it, leadership is a theme. And so I work with leaders and I help them get clear about what they were created to do and then build something with it, whether it's a business, whether it's a ministry, whether it's a nonprofit organization, but helping them get clear. And I do that over several organizations, but that's probably the one thing I do, Mike, that's consistent across everything. And then raising up leaders. I really am a person who trains trainers, raises up leaders, loves to see, uh, people operating in their spheres of influence. And so, yeah, so that's what I do. I've got, like you said, several businesses, membership organizations, but it's all about leadership and becoming the fullness of your potential.
Incredible. Well, then I
Yeah.
think we're having the chat at the perfect time and place.
Yes. Yes.
So
And you
we,
asked me to tell you where I was from. Did you ask me that?
please,
So
please do. Yeah.
yeah, so I live in Washington State. Well, I grew up in Washington State. Now I live in North Carolina, in the States, in Raleigh, North Carolina. And yeah, moved here about 14 years ago. But my work, I raised my daughter as a single mother. So I figured out how to utilize technology at a way before other people knew what I was talking about. So I love the online world and connecting with people, globally. So yeah.
Incredible. Well, yeah, here all the way in China, we see you crystal clear from the East Coast of the States. So we're very lucky and fortunate to
So
be able to have you in our lives here.
yay! So glad to be
let's
here.
let's dive in to your leadership journey. We talked a little bit before hitting the record button that your leadership journey started quite early, maybe even around some of the age of the students that we have the privilege of working with here. Would it be possible to give us a little bit of a sneak peek as to how your leadership journey unfolded?
Absolutely. So, one of the things about where I grew up is there were very few Black families. And so my family was an entrepreneurial family. My parents built a successful business at a pretty young age. And so I was always around leaders. It was very normal for us to go with the governor or the secretary of state. I mean, to this day, my parents are friends with all of the leaders from those days. So leadership was always modeled to me. But I distinctly remember I started off in T-ball, Mike. I was always an athlete, and I was always voted the most inspirational because I would make up the cheers and just I love to see people, do their best, and especially the underdog. I just have a soft spot for the underdog.
Mm,
And so I would do that for years. We traveled and played softball, and our team was called the Winners. And so I learned so much about the mindset of winning and all of that stuff as a young person. And then my sister, well, let me tell you the other thing that was happening in this and why I was so passionate about being positive and encouraging and inspiring people because I
mm,
was bullied.
mm,
And all through elementary school, I was bullied. And I always would say to myself, even as a little girl, is I didn't want people to feel like I felt.
mm,
So I was like, I'm going to cheer people on. I'm going to be positive. And after a while, about the age of 11 or 12, we were shifting from elementary school into middle school at that age. And my sister, of all people, pulled me aside and she said, you have a real gift with people. You really know how to make people feel good. You should get into student leadership.
mm,
And I remember being absolutely terrified. I'm like, wait a minute, you want me to go in front of the people that half of them bully me? Really? I was like, oh my goodness. And sports was kind of my, sanctuary. And I figured that was the time because we were shifting from, multiple elementary schools coming together to middle school. And so at the age of 12, I was too scared to run for class president. So I ran for class vice president. And I remember this moment, and it was one of those pivotal moments in my life. I don't remember what I said, But I remember, all the students being up in the bleachers because we had to give our student speeches to get people to vote for us. And I don't remember what I said, but I remember every single of my classmates stood up
Mhm.
and gave me a standing ovation. And it
Incredible.
was one of those like cinematic moments, when the camera moves. I was like, whoa. And I mean, it was one of those moments. And I was like, the power of words. And
Mm.
some of the people standing were the same ones that a year ago were chasing me on the playground to see if
Wow.
they can catch me, to bully me.
Wow.
And it was just absolutely pivotal in my life. And I just saw a lot of things that we could do better as students. I've always had a thing, I think students are too cliquey. And I was like, if I could do anything to break that down, to include more people, to make people feel better. And I suspect that something around what I said. To this day, I can't remember what my speech was, but that was it. I was hooked. So at 12, I was the class vice president, eighth grade. When I went to high school, president every year, ASB president. When I went to college, I ran against a grad student and a senior to be a student leader and won by 60%. So it was just in
Wow.
my blood. And so that's my leadership journey, because I just was always told young people can make a difference.
That is incredible. And it takes so
Yeah.
much courage to move from having had difficult, contentious relationships with your classmates and contemporaries to then have the guts to stand in front of them and say, hey, now please support me in this.
Yes.
Would
I
it,
need your vote. Yeah. Yeah.
would it be possible for us to understand a little bit just how you overcame that challenge? I don't want to skip over this because I think there's so many students who are in middle school age or high school age who don't necessarily get along swimmingly with every classmate out there,
With
and
every
who may
single
be
person. Yeah.
on the receiving end of being bullied. So what did you do to help get yourself ready to take that step of courage and run for class vice president?
Mhm. It's really interesting. I think about that. So there was like this duality in my life. So, yes, I was getting bullied, but then I would come home to have a highly supportive family.
Mm.
That my mother was the head of the school board, a speaker, a trainer. My father was a successful entrepreneur. So I got to see that modeled. And then the other thing, I grew up in a household, Mike, we were not allowed to say can't. Like, I can't do that. My parents would correct us.
That's brilliant.
And then they would always correct our diction. So if we said or mispronounced, like, words were very important. They taught us that it was a form of currency and you needed to master that. So then when I crossed the threshold of my house, there was, that pilot light in me that knew, yeah, this is only temporary. Uh, this is only temporary. It's not going to end here. They may not know me or whatever. I really channeled that into athletics. And that's why I was so passionate about making sure we were, being rooted on, because I tell you, I didn't want people to feel like that. So I thought if I felt like that, other people must feel like this. And what can I do to impact that? But it really came from my family. And I talk to people a lot that's like, well, what if you don't have that family? For me, it was about having a concept, even at that age, of what the ideal is. So, what's the ideal Ericka look like? What is that? And how can I try to be that on a daily basis for people? I knew what it felt like to be on the receiving end of meanness, of negative words, of all of that. And I really decided at a young age, I was not going to be that person.
Mhm.
And so there was some values in there. There was, being clear about what I was striving for in terms of being my best self. And and then I think, how do I put this? So I come from generations of entrepreneurs, and there was some inherited inner knowing I always have had that there was greatness in me. I just needed to tap into it. And so that pilot light never went out.
Mm.
I never let anybody blow that out. And I think part of that was the home life. And I did my inner circle of friends. They were really good people. It was kind of that outer circle where all of that other stuff came from. So
So it sounds as though simultaneously you were able to think very maturely at that age and say, okay, in the long run, everything's going to be okay. I have this support network. And then it also did require a little bit of resilience in that moment too, if I hear you right.
absolutely. Yeah. And I'm not saying like every moment I was like, dun, 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 strong, powerful Ericka. There's moments I'd come home and cry or different
Of
things.
course.
But I always could come back to that center because I just had this knowing that there's so much more and this is temporary.
Incredible. So
Yeah.
moving on in your leadership journey, so then as a student leader and as a community leader, you clearly had incredible impact. And then moving on to beginning your own career, brand, set of companies, portfolio of books. I mean, again, as I mentioned, your work is prolific. How did you make that first step into working on your own, and then how have you developed as a leader through that process?
Oh, that's good. Well, again, entrepreneurship was kind of the model. At age 5, I would go with my parents to the office, and I knew how to collate workshop packets,
Oh
for
wow.
their trainings, and we would just go and order around the table, and that's what I was doing. And then every summer, when the rest of my friends were out playing and at the lake or whatever, I would have to work with my parents. So there was always a sense of understanding the power of entrepreneurship. And I had another one of those pivotal cinematic moments. I guess 12 was a really important year in my life. I was 12. And every year, my parents would have the gathering of all of the team members or their employees and their families. And I remember one particular year, it was either 12 or 13. I watched all these cars pulling in with all these families and children, and they were playing and having barbecue and all this stuff in our yard. And I had this moment that I was like, my parents make all this happen. Like their livelihood, I didn't have the language for livelihood, but like mama and daddy
Hmm.
make this happen. And I got to see the families and the kids and how they were impacted. And I think then I was bit. And I started going, or bit by the entrepreneurial bug, I should say. And then I started going to the library and I would study books on like, how does a kid start a business? And I would like be like, okay, I can do a lemonade stand. I can do a garage sale. I can, I always worked for my parents, but I always wanted to have my own. And when I was 18, my 18th birthday, while the rest of my friends are worried about partying and all that stuff, I went to the Secretary of State's office and got a business license. So I
Oh my
always wanted
goodness.
to build. Yeah, that's what I did on my 18th birthday. That was my birthday present to myself. So I always wanted to build. And then I'd gotten involved in DECA, which is an organization that raises young entrepreneurs. And I remember writing, mock business plans and all of that. And I was 18, no, 17, my senior year in high school, and I wanted to put together an image consultant firm. And that was my business because I wanted people to feel better about themselves and what does that look like? And so I really started studying kind of how do you translate my passion for people into business? And I didn't end up doing an image consulting firm, but I did start doing leadership training for young people when I was 18. I was going into high schools and elementaries and middle schools teaching leadership because I had a gift to mobilize students. And we got some crazy stuff accomplished at our schools at that time.
And what were you teaching then, and how does it compare to what you think about leadership now? Have there been any changes of thought or changes of opinion over the few years?
Oh, that's so good. There's basics, and I still to this day don't like mean people. And I tell you, I mean, like it's just not
Yeah,
necessary.
amen to
Do
that. Yeah.
the work so you don't have to walk around being insecure and feel better by putting other people down. So that has not changed. Creating environments that are safe for people to be successful, being, to talk about success. And I always reached across, what we would perceive as boundaries. So, wow, there's somebody over there that, she's always in the corner. Nobody really talks to her. Well, I would be the one to go talk to her. And I remember even in 6th grade, there was a really shy girl in our class, and my teacher saw that in me and rearranged the desk arrangement and put me by her. Her name was Robin. And she would like not look at anybody, look down. And we ended up being best friends. And my teacher said, oh, I sat you by Robin intentionally because I knew you could pull out her personality. And so somehow I always had that genius in me. And to this day, it's like, who could we be if we could get rid of all the gunk and all the insecurity and all the negative stuff that we have to manage in our lives? Who could we be if we could tap into our potential? I'm just fanatical about that. And that has not changed. And then what does it take to set up successful organizations where people aren't competing, but we're uplifting and celebrating? That hasn't changed. Being positive, the language I use, I was very clear even then that I couldn't get away with stuff my friends could. So they could go to a party and act crazy, but I would hear about it on Monday. And so I learned at a young age that I had to be a role model, and I couldn't get away with the stuff other kids could. And so that's, to this day, that's still, I could have fun, I can do those things, but they were just like, I never drank because I think I tried it once and it was something to do, and I heard about it on Monday. Now forget all the other classmates that were drinking or whatever they were doing. And I realized there was a double standard for a leader. And then we would have these table talk conversations at dinner with my family who would talk about that. I learned then, don't worry about the people who, we call them haters now, or the mean whatever. Don't worry about that. Stay focused. So all of those things, they're still fundamental. And kindness, Mike, it sounds so simple, but can we be kind to each other? Can we get to know each other? How do we begin to see gifts in each other that we can walk side by side, and what we could build together as a student leadership team, or even, a team of entrepreneurs? It's so much better than what we could do alone. And those have been absolute consistencies that I learned then, and I still move in those today. So it was really founded, when I in my teens.
There's so much there that I want to dive into, Ericka. I'm hearing themes of self-awareness. I'm hearing themes of responsibility. I'm hearing themes of cooperation instead of competition. That one, actually, I'd love to jump into. As a student leader, let's imagine that I am a vice president of my class, or I'm president of the charity club, or I'm working with some other students to create a great fundraiser for a cause I care deeply about. What are some actions that I can take as a student leader to ensure that a group of peers that I'm working with can work together towards a common goal rather than competing for the glory in that instance?
Oh, adults still do it, Mike. I mean, like, we still do
I
that,
know.
and it's gotten worse with social media. It hasn't gotten better. Uh, for me, it starts with doing my self work. I knew at a young age I didn't have a lot of. My family was, they were there, but outside of that, I didn't have a lot of role models. I didn't have a lot of that, and so I read a lot, and I established kind of who I wanted to be. That was really key. And then I've I know the language for it now, but where am I versus where do I want to be? And how can I get better today?
Mhm.
Like, what can I do differently? I can't take back yesterday, but what can I do differently today? Or that mean thing I said. And I paid attention. I remember when I, like, my student friends could gossip, they could talk about each other behind their back or whatever, and that was one of the things I couldn't get away with. It always got back to the person, and it always got me in trouble, and I always ended up apologizing. So, light bulb, how about I don't do that? How about I just don't talk about people behind their backs? And so that I just started learning, really, because I had a soft heart, and I was like, I don't want to keep hitting up against the same things. And I paid very close attention to, okay, that didn't feel good. What could I do differently? And then being that space of vulnerability for other people. And that was huge. I remember, again, I think I was 12, maybe I was 14, but they had this program at my school called Natural Helpers. And so
Mm.
they surveyed all the kids and said, who are the people you naturally confide in? And they took us on this training weekend, and we all got to be vulnerable, and it was just transformative for my school. So vulnerability has always been a huge thing. I'm not acting like I'm perfect, I'm not trying to be perfect, but if I can create spaces that I can talk about what I'm struggling with, or what hurt my feelings, or what I did, I can open up and be vulnerable.
Yep.
It gives people the permission to do that. And then being able to be to hold your tongue. when someone's sharing something with you, that you become that safe place of trust. That's a huge part of a leader, because no one wants a leader that you're going to confide in and they know your inner secrets, or could be a financial struggle now in your business or whatever as an older person. But whatever it is, and you don't want to see that on social media, you don't want to see that. And so I just paid close attention to what hurt my feelings and what hurt other people's feelings, and said, okay, well, I don't want to do that anymore. Let's do the opposite.
It's very self-aware and empathetic, and I think that the last point you mentioned about holding your tongue and making sure that you're seen as a trustworthy discussion partner, a confidant,
Yes.
leader. I really want to just touch on this point a little bit more, because I think that
Okay.
in many relationships that I've seen among with young men and women, secrets are almost a currency. It's almost a way to
Wow.
curry favor with each other. Is, oh, I'm going to share my secrets with you if you share secrets with me. But as I think we've seen, and through you just shared, Ericka, sometimes it doesn't end up so happily. So I'm wondering, what can we do as leaders to demonstrate to others that we are someone worthy of confiding in? And it's one of those things that's a little bit funky, because it's something that you don't do, right? In many ways that shows that. But this is something I think is so key. I just in working with students here, I've heard way too many stories of someone coming into tears because my secret was shared, and this type of thing. It really bums me out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we are so, especially as young people, we're so notorious for it. But here's the thing: before someone says a secret, they typically say something that sounds like, hey, Mike, I want to tell you this. You promise you won't tell anybody.
Mm.
And then you say, I promise I won't tell anybody. But at least we have usually one anybody. Like, I'm not supposed to tell anybody. Then we turn around and go, promise you won't tell anybody. And then they have an
Oh
anybody.
man.
And then everybody has an anybody. And you're like, I just told one person. And so I figured out for me how to be that safe place. And mind you, this was after I didn't know that. And it hurt some people's feelings. And I learned at a young age, you could positively use words, or my words could hurt people. Because I was in leadership
Mhm.
position, what I would say would carry more weight.
Mm.
And I can count on on one hand how many times I learned, I'm like, I'm done. So I journaled a lot, because there were things that, oh my gosh, that was juicy. I journaled, or I ripped that journal up, but I had to get it out. It just couldn't be to another person. And yeah, so that was a huge thing for me. I started journaling around that age. And then I kept myself busy. If you're busy and you're focused forward, it's like you can move at a different altitude than a lot of the drama. And then a funny thing happens: people stop bringing drama to you, so you can focus in more. But keeping your word, as juicy as it might be, there's not an anybody we need to tell. We need to hold that, or journal it and then get rid of it. You don't want the evidence anywhere. But that's something I used to do. Like, I have to get this out. Oh my goodness, you wouldn't believe it. And I write it and I would rip it up. And then I'm like, whew, got it out. Hallelujah.
That phrase, everybody has an anybody. That's can we make that an ErickaDJames trademark or something? That's gold.
We could say that. Don't tell anybody. I won't tell anybody. And then there's my,
I love
yeah,
that.
to this
I love
day,
that.
we do
Everybody
it.
has an anybody.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned that sometimes you do need to apologize. Sometimes you do need to own up and say, hey, team, or hey, person, friend, family member, I did make a mistake. Would it be possible, Ericka, to take us in the room with you as you have those conversations? What does that sound like? Is it just sending somebody an instant message saying, sorry, talk to you later? Is it a one-on-one conversation face to face? How do you go
Mm.
about offering these apologies? I think it's something we can all learn from.
Oh, that's good. Uh, it depends on the channel of communication, right? Because sometimes relationship will break down and someone won't take your call or whatever. So I always prefer face to face, eye to eye, heart to heart if possible. And, having to get clear about what I need to say. And then the second piece is, if, let's say, I can't talk with them either on the phone in person, then the next thing would be, what channel of communication might they accept from me? Maybe they'll accept an email. Maybe I try to not text, but I think that communication, it's in levels. But if it has to be a text, fine. But I've got to just own it. I'm not blaming you. I'm saying, I did this. I apologize for any hurt or damage it may have caused. It was not my intention, or whatever it hasn't happened in a long time because I've learned that lesson hard. But I will always be honest and, let people know I messed up on that one. I'm so sorry. And yeah, it's direct, as close to person as I can get. But what I won't do is not deal with it. Like not say anything, because there's shame in it, there's embarrassment, there's like, oh my gosh, you feel bad. And it's a relationship is too valuable to, I really believe this, to burn a bridge. I was talking to my daughter the other day, and she was not a nice person. It's the craziest thing. Like, I'm this soft heart, forgive people, do your heart work. She's like, yeah, no, that's not for, I don't want to talk to them. It's like, are you my child? But she's the absolute opposite for me. And she said to me, she still calls me mama, so I'm quoting her. She says, mama, you have always like forgiven people. You've done your work around that. And it's really awesome because you've never burnt bridges. And as a leader, here's the thing: people might talk about you, or they might not be supportive, but as soon as the success starts to happen, oh, everybody knew you could do it. Everybody's like excited. Everybody wants to be on that winning team. And it was always like soft heart, tough skin, and forgive them because they're coming back. And so not burning a bridge is really important. And so I really spend time thinking, how can I not burn that bridge and take responsibility? Whether it was intentional or not, it's never intentional. I mean, seldom intentional, I would say, for me anyway. But I take responsibility and apologize. And the really important thing is owning what I did, not blaming, well, you did this, so I have the right to do that. No. I'm going to own what I did. You can choose to own what you did or not, but I need to get clean in my conscience, and so I can get this off my mind and keep moving forward. Is that helpful?
Absolutely.
Okay. I hope
And
so.
and I think it really makes clear, Ericka, a larger general theme that I'm getting through our conversation, which is responsibility. This is something you talked about that I think was modeled to you by your family and by the network of people that you learned at a younger age. It's something you talked about in student leadership. Now, in terms of being a model for those other important people in your life, namely your daughter. And when it comes to responsibility, often something, at least that comes to me when I talk with the young men and women here at Learning Leaders, is if I'm not sure where I'm going, if I'm not sure what my next step is, if I'm not sure what my value is, I'm not exactly sure I want to commit to something. And if I can't commit to something, I can't be responsible. There's sort of like a little chain reaction that happens here. How do you look, Ericka, for your next step, your light, your values, and the overall direction that you want to go, to which you can hold yourself responsible? It's a big question, but I think it's all.
Ooh, that's a
But I
deep
think
question.
it's really all connected,
Yeah.
and I'm hearing a big theme on that from you.
Yeah. Well, I have always had, as long as I can remember, I have always had respect for a spiritual higher power. Like I grew up in the church, and there was always that that faith in me, and so there was always that spiritual self where I prayed a lot. I talked to God. Um, Talked to my teddy bear. I had a little dog named Christopher. We would have these great conversations when I was little. Christopher. And poor stuffed animal. He was probably so stressed out. But anywho, and and let's see, let me get back to the question you were asking me. So it's for me, it's been a spiritual understanding and a divine connection, particularly as a Christian for me. But you can, it's not so much what someone's religion is. It's, do you know there's something beyond you, that there's a power that created you, and I've always been able to tap into that. And I remember even being really young, asking my sister questions about God. And then the second thing is having vision. I mentioned it earlier, but having a concept of who I wanted to be. And I really got that from reading, and then from being around influencers in our community. But I would read a lot as a young person. I would always read summer books, and there were these images of people or these lifestyles that I liked. And this is a funny story, but my sister and I, who you hear that theme again, because she was also a dreamer like me, we used to play what we called Thelma and Rosetta.
Tell us.
And we would sit at the
Tell us
kitchen
about this game.
table, and I must have, yes, it'd be Thelma and Rosetta. And we would sit there, and I have my coffee cup here, and we would, I don't know why, but we had English accents. And we'd be like, darling, how was your book signing today? And like we would sip our tea, and we practice writing our autograph because we're like, and we would just make believe these lives. And to this day, we laugh and still call each other Thelma and Rosetta because those are the very lives we created. And so that dreaming, and that no, there is no plan B. If you're going to go for this, we just have to find a way. That has been a steady theme. And so having that ideal, you're not there yet, but what's your ideal? And it changes, like I thought at what point I wanted to be an attorney or I wanted to be this, but there was character that I wanted to emulate. And I started to build that at a pretty young age. Leadership really has you do that pretty quickly.
Amazing.
But having that ideal self is just huge. Yeah.
And you mentioned it has changed over time. How do you give yourself the grace and the space to be able to say, yeah, I can change when I grow up, or when I grow young, or however we grow?
Yes. Yeah, because I even in college it changed several times. I thought I wanted to be a civil rights attorney, and then I was on that path and discovered pretty quickly I don't want to be a civil rights attorney. Actually, I wanted to do broadcast, and I wanted to have my own TV show, and so I would just follow the rabbit trail, if you will. Like, okay, if I want to do this, then I need to do this, this, and this. And somewhere in there was a moment of clarity where I'm like, ooh, this isn't it. Let me shift over here. And just really gave myself space. I was always a pretty strong-willed child. So even when my parents were saying, no, 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 you're going to do it this way, I'm like, no, I need to do it this way. And then they would just kind of let me, or sometimes like, we're going this way. But I would really kind of have this inner sense that this isn't working. This isn't something I could do for the rest of my life, or I'm going to be bored doing this. And it was always just a pivot where it was never so radical, but it was just a pivot. Like when I thought I wanted to be in civil rights, my father hooked me up with a internship at the U.S. His best friend he ran the the civil rights program in the government. So I got an internship, and I was sitting in a meeting that I was supposed to be the little quiet intern, and all these attorneys, none of which looked like me, which was fascinating, uh, were saying that we need to do a survey and see if racism still exists.
Oh no.
And I was just supposed to be observing the meeting, and I was like,
Oh
"Excuse
no.
me, excuse me. I know I'm supposed to be sitting here quietly, but you can come home with me tonight, and you can save a whole lot of taxpayers' dollars and not do a survey because racism is still real." And so I realized that it wasn't rights we needed economics, and I ended up pivoting to economics because I wanted, to understand. I was already doing self-development, so I didn't want to go to school for that. I wanted to put the financial piece with it, but it was a succession of pivots, and I would just kind of follow, my gut on it, and just give myself some grace, because this is what I knew, Mike. And if we can know this, that even though it might look crazy right now, and I might be confused right now, I'm going someplace. There is a vision I'm building, and that I never lost track of.
That's amazing. I do want to pull on this thread a little bit, something you just mentioned. And and I'm aware that it can be a little touchy, but I'm just going to dive right in. For leaders who are in communities with those who don't look like you, aren't from your same background, whether it be the color of our skin or the country on our passport, whatever it is,
Yeah.
it may just be more difficult to be understood by those people around us. How do you, as a Black woman, or how does someone as a Chinese woman or a Japanese man, or in today's day and age, someone who wants to go somewhere where they're not necessarily from, How does someone establish credibility as quickly as possible with that group of people? Because I think if we're honest with ourselves, there is still racism in the world. There is still incredible amounts of prejudice, and people simply may not give you the respect you deserve right away.
That's a good question. That's a whole deep conversation. So the key I've learned is proximity, right? The more we can have experiences in life that are shoulder to shoulder, that we're next to each other, we get to experience, wait a minute, we have some commonalities, and it can start to break those barriers. And so what I always did is I put myself in environments. I would find out where the people were, where did they gather that I wanted to get to know, or that needed, I felt like needed to get to know me, or if I wanted to make impact there. And I would figure out what meeting, what committee, what whatever it was, and I would just show up. And then they look at you like you're crazy. They, ice you and cold shoulder. And I just was like, I don't care. Like, I know that I'm supposed to break ground and bring
Mhm.
people together. And so there's just going to have to be some discomfort, but I'm not going anywhere. And to this day, that happens to me. Like, there's things I'm like, oh, I have a right to be here. I don't care what your prejudice is saying or your background. I have a right to be here. And I'm not talking about scenarios where my life is threatened or anything like that. But in those closed circles that people haven't been around anybody like me or seen anybody like me, I am very bold about entering into that. And again, that comes from that divine connection
Mhm.
for me, that it's like, no, 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 we need to break this up. And I know I'm being used as a vessel to break
Mhm.
walls down. And that happens to me all the time. It has my entire life, going in uncomfortable places, and don't worry about people's discomfort, because after a while it'll melt away.
Mhm.
And that's what my parents taught and modeled. And it's really none of my business what people think of me. I'm just going to do what I'm called to do.
It sounds as though, Ericka, you just simply take the first step. You just proactively say, this is the end
Absolutely.
result that we're all hoping for together. And if it requires me to take one extra step in the beginning, then I'm going to be brave enough to do that.
Yeah. Someone's got to trailblaze. So I've always been that person to just trailblaze, because that's what was modeled. So even it could be subtle. It wasn't always like some huge political thing, but getting in a club that nobody knew me, or anything like that. I've always been a trailblazer. Well, I'm supposed to be here, so y'all are just going to have to adjust. That's always been my mindset.
Yeah.
Like, I'm supposed to be here. You'll get used to
If
it. Yeah.
someone's going to trailblaze, why not me?
Why not? Someone's got to do it.
Ericka, this has been such an energizing and uplifting discussion. I really appreciate it. I really hope we can get you back on the podcast, because there's so many things now that I want to just keep going down, but I want to be respectful of your time. I know you have an incredibly busy schedule.
Just let me know. I'd be happy to come back. Yeah.
Can you share with me and our audience where we can go to learn more about your work and what you're currently up to these days?
Yes. So you can visit my website, which kind of has all the stuff on it, at Ericka-James.com. And I spell my name Ericka James.com. And lots of stuff I'm up to. But what I'm most excited about is a promise that I gave myself, and it was given to me when I was 17, and that I would have my own TV show. And so all these years have been building, writing, creating courses. So when this moment came and this opportunity came, I would have a back end transformational process for people. And that is what's happening. So last year I laid my first season of the ErickaDJames show, Life on Purpose. And quiet is kept. It's not a public thing yet, but it is in development with a major production company here in the States. So in the next year or so, I will have my own
This is
show.
so exciting.
And so I'm really excited. Isn't that neat? Yeah. So that promise of that television, even though there were 100 pivots since then, it has still come full circle. So you can see the first season. You could click to that at the website I just shared, Ericka-James.com. But that is something I'm up to, and I've laid a lot of courses. I love teaching, and getting my back end ready and the courses ready, so people can be confident leaders to really make an impact. So that's what I'm most excited about. But yeah, the show that's coming out, and the courses that'll be made available.
Well, we're going to link to your site and those videos so that everybody can have access to them. And I can share that I've seen some of the videos online, and they are awesome. The set design looks so great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, the gentleman who built that, I was like, if you could build this set for me, he's like, I'll build it for you, Ericka. And it really turned out like the vision. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're so lucky today to be joined by ErickaDJames. And Ericka, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. Really, really exciting for me to be able to share with some of these students the themes that you talked about: responsibility, courage, being a trailblazer, the importance of role models from a young age, the importance of overcoming difficulties that you have as a middle school student, which then have inspired your journey up until now. Before I let you go, just have to ask you one question. At Learning Leaders, something we take very seriously is continuing to learn new things always. And I would be curious if you'd be able to share one thing you've learned recently before we go.
Yeah, so one thing I'm really leaning into, and not in a like surface way, but what is our genius? Like we all have genius, and when we can tap into that, it's not necessarily what we do, it's what's underneath what we do. And so I've really been leaning into how can I lead with my genius? How can I understand my genius? And your genius it's almost like a divine or supernatural gift you have. And so empathy is part of my genius, being able to feel people. Well, how can I pull that in to every area of my life? So that's been something that I've learned lately, what that looks like and how we sabotage our genius. And so that's what I've been working on to really get that genius out there.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we can learn more about our own genius and hear more your take on it in the upcoming show.
Yes, I look forward to it. Can't wait I hope I get to see this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
let me know, Mike.
Well, thanks so much, Ericka. We'll keep in touch.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.
All right. Bye
Bye.
bye.